Another street.
So next Saturday, the Garst Museum.
Yeah, I
And
posted.
montage at 12:30.
12:30. Yeah.
12:30.
And
Okay.
we'll meet here at the church at 12:10 or so.
Okay.
Anybody that wants to meet, I put in the announcement, anybody can meet directly at Montage or directly at the museum.
Okay.
I said, we would try to arrive at the museum.
Montage is downtown Greenville. If you go in on any of the streets and get on Broadway, and it's on the south side of the street, big sign.
It's in the block, it's just right across from the court.
Yeah, not far
Okay.
from the courthouse.
Okay.
I think it's 1 block.
Maybe, or, yeah, 1 block off, but
One block off.
it's on the opposite side of the street from the courthouse.
Okay.
We're talking about our trip to the museum next Saturday. Yeah, we're gonna gather here or in Greenville, which would be close to you, if you're interested. But anyway, Garst Museum should be interesting.
It's a nice museum.
Yeah,
You were there a long time.
we did, yeah.
I know,
They just had their big fundraiser hit in yesterday, so I hope they did well. And one of our congregants donated a very nice piece for the auction there. A very nice piece of
it's
property.
my bicycle.
Your bicycle, what are you gonna be riding now?
Exercise, you spin.
I never fallen off my bicycle, and I decided it was time
That's
to
time.
not fall
That's
off my
time.
bicycle.
That's time for somebody else to enjoy it.
I'm somebody else to do it.
Now, the Queen of England did that about 20 years ago for Trooping with the Color. She said, I'm not gonna ride anymore. She'd ridden all the time, every year during the Trooping with the Color. She said, I don't think I'll do that anymore.
Yeah.
I just went to my foot doctor, Dr. Mayer.
Oh, yes.
He had an accident on his bicycle a week or so ago. He was
Oh.
over here around Hollinsburg in the loose gravel, and the streets are torn up for the sewage system.
Yeah.
Wrecked his shoulder. He was off work for a week with that. Had surgery
Oh,
on it. He still had a brace and everything on him when I was there. Yeah, he's one of those.
Hardy
Well, the 3-event
triathlon.
triathlon.
He is extremely, yeah, he's very accomplished
Yes.
in that.
Yeah.
He's a good doctor. I love him also. I just think he's great. Remember the young man who came here and step danced, drew somebody?
Oh, yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah.
Dr. Mayer, because they just ruin their feet, or they have to be in tip-top shape to do that. Dr. Mayer took care of him for years. I don't know whatever happened to Drew.
He's the one. Dr. Mary's the one.
He took care of that
Oh,
step
yeah.
dancer.
Yeah.
And anything, particularly in athletes and things, and especially that cause a lot of special things.
Yeah.
Lots of people go to him. He is really good.
Yeah.
And his wife, but I don't know if she's an ex-wife or what, because she left the practice, didn't she?
Yeah.
Jennifer.
Yeah, I don't know if she's ex or not
I
either,
think
but
where
she
she
left.
is.
Oh, okay.
She was a high school volleyball coach or something like that, I think.
Oh, well, she was good.
Sort of left, yeah.
Jennifer, whatever her name was. She was good podiatrist, I thought.
Yeah.
Yeah, step dancing. You don't see as much of that anymore.
Mhm.
Maybe they've all ruined their feet, unfortunately. I was in New Green. I went to New Green. Oh, is that right? Yeah. With friends. It's a beautiful town.
We were at the Pottery Place in Indiana Pottery Place, Peterson's.
Okay, welcome to First Universalist of New Madison. This beautiful summer day, a little on the muggy side, just kind of a little touch of what we're going to be getting next week. It's supposed to be in the 90s next week.
It's 2 weeks, isn't
2 weeks? Oh, that's
it?
thanks for that.
2 weeks. Huh?
2 weeks of that each.
Heat, that's what I've heard, so.
So bring your fans and your, whatever those things are, you put them in the refrigerator and then wrap them around your neck to keep cool. We'll have the fans running here, but I don't know how much that's going to help, so. I don't really think there's any way we can get around it. Do we have any announcements? We're going to Garst Museum next Saturday. We'd like to go on Sundays, but they're not open on Sundays, so we're going to go Saturday. Everybody is welcome, whether you attend church or not, anybody that is aware of it. We'll meet at Montage at approximately 12:30 or 1. That's the little restaurant in Greenville right there on Broadway across from the courthouse. We'll have a little nosh, and then we'll head over to the museum about 2. The museum's open till 4, so 2 hours ought to give us enough. And I'll give you an overview of Garst today. I was going to do, and I want to thank Margaret for her picture, I was going to do a thing on endangered species, endangered animals today, but I kind of shifted horses midstream when I remembered that Garst was this weekend. So we'll give you a little overview of what Garst Museum is and what's in it, so you'll have some kind of idea of what you're going to see. And we'll do the endangered animals next week, so Margaret's picture will be up again. Mike nicely printed off a copy on his printer. It's back there if you want to actually look at the thing. Pretty incredible, fine, detailed black ink drawing. I had no idea Margaret was that talented. So
She shared with me that she'd been working on that since mid-March, and it just recently completed it, as you can see the
Yeah.
detail.
the patience it would take to do that and the eye-hand coordination to me is just astounding. I can't even write a sentence that stays level across the page, so there's no way I could ever do anything like that.
What's the cost of admission to the Garst?
I think it's $8 or $9 senior.
There's a senior admission, yeah, and I think it is 8 or 9.
8 or 9, yes.
Yeah.
You think it's 8?
And anybody that can't pay, we'll pay your way in. Don't worry about that if you can't pay.
If you put it in your gas tank for a gallon of gas, don't worry
Yes.
about it. We understand.
And Mike did mention that if you don't want to drive clear to Greenville and waste that gas, we are going to probably carpool from the church. I may be working that day, so I may come straight from work there, so I probably won't be at the church. I'll probably meet you at the Garst, but we'll see what the weather is and what's going on. Okay, the prelude, Amazing Grace.
If you want to follow the words for Amazing Grace, it's on page 205 in your hymnal.
205 in the hymnal. many occasions. But don't forget the history behind, the story behind Amazing Grace. The Englishman who was involved in the slave trade for years and came to regret that decision in his life, and his quest for forgiveness and amelioration. All right, chalice lighting. To learn more about being human by Erica Hewitt, one of my favorite authors from the Unitarian Sourcebook. Welcome to this morning, this day, this opportunity to be together in community, which is a time of joy, comfort, and sometimes challenges. The Unitarian Universalist congregation is a place where we come to learn more about being human. We're not here because we figured out life's questions or because we think we've got it right. We come here to learn more about being in relationship together, how to listen, how to forgive, how to be vulnerable, how to create trust and compassion with one another. Our opening hymn is 118, This Little Light. Let it shine. All right. This is the Garst Museum. I'm assuming everybody here has been to the Garst Museum, but if not, this is what it looks like when you drive up. And this is the actual entrance where you go in. They've built on 3 or 4 times, and it's pretty substantial. I forgot how many, I think it's like 11,000 square feet. It's a pretty large place with pretty varied things. I'll go through kind of an outline of what's in there when we get to the presentation part. Our children's story. 10 weirdest things animals do. We're not going to do all 10 because it's like 20 minutes long, but I was kind of captivated. I'm one of those things like in the movie Up. I'm like the dog. Squirrel. If I see something, I get dragged into it, and then I get involved in it, and then I want to bring it to you. So we're going to start it, and we'll go through a little bit of it here.
Why do chimps fling their poop around? Our hairy friends from the animal kingdom are well known for their smelly habit of tossing their fresh feces at unsuspecting bystanders. This might seem like the dumbest possible thing a monkey could do, but there is a reason for it. You see, chimp experts say that poop flinging isn't nearly as common in the wild. Chimps roaming free still like to throw things when they're scared, annoyed, or anxious, but they tend to stick to rocks and sticks. Chimps at zoos or in wildlife sanctuaries tend to have fewer things around to throw, so, being practical primates, they throw whatever they have in easy supply, and that means poop. But chimps don't just throw poop because it's clutter. Over time, they begin to realize that throwing their poop gets a much bigger reaction than throwing just about anything else. In fact, these prankster primates have even been documented pooping in their hand and waiting for someone to bother them. Now, you might think that it's just the immature monkeys who throw their poo, but that's actually not the case. Chimps who have better aim when flinging feces tend to have more brain development in their motor cortex, the part that controls physical motion, which you might expect. But they also tend to have much more developed frontal cortex too, which helps process language, meaning they were slightly smarter, more developed, and better communicators. So, next time you see a chimpanzee hurl its poop across a cage in your general direction, just remember, he's not doing it because he's dumb. He's trying to send you a warning. Do bees die after a sting? There are all kinds of bees buzzing out there in the world. Bumblebees, honeybees, carpenter bees, yellow jackets, wasps, and hornets, just to name a few that you may have heard of. But it turns out that only one species of bee can actually die from stinging you, the honeybees. And it happens to them for a, well, kind of gruesome reason. You see, a honeybee's stinger is barbed and doesn't exactly stab, but screws into your flesh like a corkscrew, driving their whole stinger into your skin and injecting a venom called apoptosis. But this isn't some sort of strange last-ditch suicide sting. Honeybees can pull their stinger out of other insects and most other animals. But mammal skin is thick and made of tiny little fibers that tend to tangle up the barbs on the bee's stinger. When the bee tries to pull away after corkscrew stabbing you, its stinger gets caught in our skin and it's ripped right out of the bee's abdomen as it tries to fly away. But even after accidentally killing itself, the bee isn't done doing damage. A bee stinger can keep shooting venom into your body for up to 10 minutes if you don't remove it. Sometimes, a honeybee will survive a stinging if the person being stung has thin skin that doesn't quite hold the barbed stinger in place. But since a honeybee's stinger is designed to dig as deep as possible, well, that doesn't tend to happen too often. In a honeybee hive, female worker bees are actually the only ones who can sting. In fact, male honeybees don't even have stingers. So, do bees actually die when they sting you? Well, honeybees do. They just don't mean to. So, if you see a bee buzzing about, it's best to just keep your distance and let it do its thing. You really don't want to get stung, and it's safe to assume the bees aren't looking to rip themselves apart either. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? Right off the bat, this seems like an easy answer. The chicken. No, the egg. No, wait. The chicken needs to... But the egg can't. Okay, so maybe this one isn't obvious. Over the years, many cultures have tried to solve this dilemma. In the Middle Ages, some Europeans believed that the chicken must have come first, since according to their beliefs, God created birds before he created eggs. But some ancient texts wrote it the opposite. They believed in a cosmic egg, or world egg, that the sky, earth, and all of existence hatched from. Now, few people today think the earth was hatched out of an egg, but if you ask most biologists, they'll tell you the egg did in fact come first. Sort of. Around 300 million years ago, reptiles became the first living things on Earth to lay eggs. It took another 100 million years or so for birds to arrive on the scene, and by then, animals had been laying eggs for millions of years. So eggs did come first, just not chickens. Not satisfied by that answer? Neither am I. So let's finally put this to rest. Which came first, the chicken or the chicken egg? Well, according to Robert Krulwich of NPR, the egg came first. Here's why. A long time ago, there was a chicken-like bird. It was very, very similar to a chicken, but not quite chicken-like enough to be considered, well, a chicken. Two of these chicken-like birds had an egg together, and the genes in that egg mutated just enough to change it into a new species that today we call a chicken. So, two non-chickens laid a mutated egg that was the very first chicken egg in history. That egg hatched into the world's very first chicken, and voila, an age-old question answered. Now go and press your friends with that one. Why do pigs love mud so much? It might seem like pigs play in the mud just to get as dirty as they can, but it actually serves a specific function. It helps keep them cool. You see, as humans, we sweat whenever our bodies get too hot in the sun. As that sweat evaporates, it cools the skin to help keep us at around 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. But that's humans. Unfortunately, pigs don't have nearly as many sweat glands as we do, and the ones they do have aren't very powerful. That means pigs can't sweat enough to keep themselves cool in the sweltering sun. So, what do hogs do on a hot day to keep from overheating? You guessed it! They roll, splash, and play in some nice, cool mud. That's right! Pigs have found their own natural, muddy way to protect their skin from the beating sun. In fact, mud can lower a pig's body temperature by more than 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit, which makes it even more efficient than sweating is for humans. It works so well because it takes a long time for water to evaporate out of mud. A piglet's mud rat protects them much longer than if they just hopped in some cool water. When the mud finally dries on a pig's skin, it forms a crusty barrier against the sun. That dry dirt also keeps flies, mosquitoes, and other parasites from biting the pigs. All that muddy protection has given our poor, quirky little friends a bit of a reputation for being dirty animals. But the truth is, they're actually pretty clean. For instance, unlike lots of other animals, pigs take pains to make sure they don't poop anywhere near where they eat or sleep. Given enough space, hogs will hide their bathroom as far away as they can. So, why do pigs like to roll in the mud? Because it keeps them cool and keeps them safe. And maybe most importantly, it honestly seems pretty fun. Why do...
Okay, we'll finish that the next time. I hope you enjoyed the knowledge that you gained. I had not realized that pigs' normal temperature is 106.5. So I've decided maybe next winter when it's really cold out, instead of sleeping with the dog, we'll sleep with the pig. So, all right. Affirmation. I can feel the suffering of millions by Anne Frank. I can feel the suffering of millions, and yet, if I look into the heavens, I think it will all come right, and that this cruelty too will end, and that peace and tranquility will return again. In the meantime, I must uphold my ideals, for perhaps the time will come when I shall be able to carry them out. Alas, for Anne Frank, that was not to happen. She was not able to carry out her ideals. She was killed in a Nazi extermination camp in 1944. Her father, however, survived, the only one of the family who survived, and he's the one who found her diary and had it published. And if you get a chance, if you're in Amsterdam on a travel thing, go to the Anne Frank Museum. It's pretty impressive. The whole experience is pretty impressive. Joys and concerns. We'll start with Ukraine. Once again, we have our sunflowers. We will not forget the Ukrainians and their suffering. It's been 7 months, 8 months, or longer than that. It's been for something that the Russians expected to roll over them and take the capital and institute a new government in 2 weeks. They've gotten a bloody nose out of that. But in a long duration war, the Russians have 10 times the population, 10 times the money, 10 times the infrastructure, and they are just pounding the snot out of the country of Ukraine and making life miserable, and the Ukrainians are not giving up. They are relying on us and other free nations for their supplies, and hopefully those supplies will reach them in time. The last I heard, they were losing at least 200 soldiers a day were dying in trying to defend their country. A sad, sad situation. We've talked about it before. When one person in one country can start a war like that and continue that war until that one person, Putin, changes his mind. We do not want to see that happen in this country. Anything else?
keep the Zimmer family in our prayers, the couple that was killed in a helicopter
In the
crash.
helicopter crash, that was in Greenville here just this week.
You have 2 children, I understand their ages 5 and 7.
Oh,
So hopefully they have family that can help, that will step in, but those kids are gonna be scarred for life.
The kids are at the grandparents when the accident occurred, I understand.
Okay. And since we're talking about children and their suffering, we do not want to forget Texas. And we didn't even get a week till there was another mass shooting. There have been mass shootings practically every 5 or 6 days now. When I say mass, I mean more than 3 or 4. The question is, what are, if anything, we're going through the talks again, and it seems like no one can agree. We can't even agree on extended background checks. We can't agree on red flag laws if somebody is known to be mentally unstable or threatening someone. Some of these people do not want their guns taken away from them. I do not understand this at all. The longer it goes on, the worse it gets, the less I'm able to understand it. We will proceed to keep looking at that. I have an inquisitive mind, and like I say, squirrel. Anytime I find something about it, we will investigate it and see what we can do. Let's see, we can't forget the January 6th hearings going on in the Congress. If anybody watched that, it was a nice little montage of what was happening. And the same people who are preventing us, who are basically sacrificing our children on the altar of the Second Amendment, are the same people who had a TV network who had a 2-hour show with no commercials. The first time ever with no commercials. Why no commercials? Because during commercials, people change channels, and somebody might by accident change channels and see the carnage that was going on the history of January 6th and become a believer as opposed to a non-believer. So they chose to forego any monetary gain they could get in 2 hours by not having any commercials to try and keep people watching their program in complete denial of what happened on January 6th. These people still say this was only an outing. It was only a minor riot. There was only a few people involved. It wasn't an insurrection. 5 people died as a result during that problem. If you listened to the hearings, you heard everything delineated, and it will be explained starting Monday morning again. So we want to keep the Capitol Police Force in our thoughts and prayers. And I know the phrase thoughts and prayers has been contaminated, but I don't have anything better at this time, so we will stay with that. Anything else? Curly is getting got a treatment to put on his leg every day. He's having fun out in the grass. He was upset yesterday. He didn't like it outside during the day when it was hot, so I put him in the stall and then let him out in the evening, and then of course it poured rain all over him, so the poor guy can't win. So I'm going to set up a place where he can get in the shade on his own, so I don't have to let him in and let him out. So that's coming for him. Anything else? All right, for those thoughts, prayers that are not able to be voiced, for those of you who might be watching, if you have concerns, if you have needs, please let us know. We are here to help. We hold all of you in highest regard. And write a few lights, which I forgot to do. All right, our message, Garst Museum. They actually have a exhibition for Longtown. If you remember, we talked about Longtown, the settlement that was African American. Ground was purchased in the early 1800s, and they created an integrated biracial school for blacks and whites on the Indiana border. They actually have an exhibit there. This is a picture of the class, one of the classes at Longtown that they have. I didn't even realize Garst had this information. I went to Richmond Museum, Richmond, Indiana, at the library to get the information from my presentation, so we may update this if I find more stuff at Garst. Let me go to my thing here and we'll go through. The Garst Museum, let's see, Crossroads of Destiny, where's my first page? Was given to The city of Greenville in 1946 used to be an inn in the city of Greenville. The Garst family, which is where the name comes from, the Garst family owns it. They donated to the city of Greenville in 1946, so that tells you how long the building's been around. I'm not sure, it didn't say in the information when the museum was incorporated. But it has numerous exhibitions. Primary, the most important, or the one that most people know about, is the Annie Oakley Information Center. There's an Annie Oakley, I think the festival's coming up at the end of July. Which is always a good time. And then we were in Cody, Wyoming during our trip through the West. Cody, Wyoming, home of Wild Bill Cody. They're trying to grab on to Annie Oakley too. Annie Oakley, as you probably know, was the primary attraction for the Wild Bill Cody, the Wild West show that he had, which was pretty impressive. He took this show all over Europe for people who loved American cowboys but didn't know what cowboys were. They actually had actual Plains Indians. They had mock stagecoach robberies. Annie Oakley did demonstrations of her shooting, and we'll get into Annie a little bit later. There's also an exhibit called Crossroads of Destiny. That would be Greenville, Ohio. The Treaty of Greenville, that's Anthony Wayne, Little Turtle, Tecumseh, the meeting of Lewis and Clark. All this happened in Greenville, Ohio. It's a stunning exhibit telling the history of the Treaty of Greenville. That's G-R-E-E-N-E, and then capital V-I-L-L-E. That's where Greenville originally came from. It was the largest stockade fort ever built in North America, and it was the scene of some of the most significant American Indian treaties ever negotiated. The Treaty of Greenville in 1795 opened the door to the settlement of the Midwest and resulted in Ohio statehood 8 years later. The treaty also ended 40 years of conflict over the upper Ohio Valley. The British from Canada incited and supported the Indians in trying to defend their territory and keep their territory against the encroaching Americans from the East Coast who wanted to expand into the Midwest. 40 years of battles. They've got battles, if you look in your history books, Tecumseh, Fallen Timbers. There's a lot of information there that we may go into at some future time. And as well, Lewis and Clark, they've met for the first time in Fort Greenville. William Clark was stationed at Greenville and took part in Anthony Wayne's Fallen Timbers campaign of 1794. In 1795, Meriwether Lewis joined the 2nd Sub-Legion of the regular army. He was sent to Greenville in time to be acquainted with Clark. Also, the name Lowell Thomas is important in the history of Greenville. I don't know how many of you know who Lowell Thomas is. You've got to be at least 60 or 70 years old to have even heard the name. But he was a famous radio announcer before they had television in the 30s and 40s. He was an adventurer, an explorer, a world traveler, and an author. He was best remembered as the radio news commentator on the CBS radio network. The vast Lowell Thomas exhibit at the Garst Museum was donated by Thomas in his later years. And the reason he's there, well, let me give a little history of him. It's filled with numerous artifacts from historic figures he interviewed, met, and befriended during his worldwide travels, especially Lawrence of Arabia. If you've heard of Lawrence of Arabia during World War II. He was born in Woodlington, Ohio, April 6, 1892. Woodlington is on 49?
49.
I think it's on 49. It's just a wide spot in the road. And I'm not sure whether there's a commemorative there for his house or not.
Made a Fort Recovery.
Yeah. Harry and Harriet Thomas, his local roots existed far before that date in the signing of the Great Treaty. All right, next is Longtown. The premier exhibit highlights the history of Longtown, a tri-racial settlement situated on the border of Ohio and Indiana. It offers a chance to explore the settlement and development of this unique community situated near Greenville. It also explains the settlement, farmland, and development of the area and the community's involvement in the Civil War. The exhibit features two foundational aspects of the town, which include the Union Literary Institute and the two main churches, Bethel Wesleyan and the African Methodist Episcopal Church. The legacy of Longtown is equality, diversity, and community. This permanent exhibit is located in the village wing of the museum. And then we have the Bull Moose Party. That's where this picture, Teddy Roosevelt in 1912 actually came to Greenville to campaign for president. Can you imagine a presidential candidate coming to a town the size of Greenville? Of course, in those days, Greenville had trains, and any place they could stop, the candidate would stand at the end of the train on the platform and give his speech. I kind of got sucked into Teddy Roosevelt and the Bull Moose Party. I hadn't studied too much about that or hadn't seen too much about it. So in 1912, the American electorate was treated to the spectacle of an incumbent president, a past president, and a future president running against each other in a three-way race for the White House. It was one of the most exciting and unusual campaigns in history. On election night in 1904, Teddy Roosevelt promised, and this is when Teddy Roosevelt was president for 2 terms, that was his second term, he promised not to run for a third term. How many know about the third term limitation, where that came from? Roosevelt was elected.
Franklin Roosevelt.
Yes, Franklin Roosevelt during World War II, and after he served that many terms, they decided
He served 4 terms.
4 terms and died before he could finish his 4th term, and Harry Truman took over. But then the Congress and the people decided that we don't want a president for life, so they decided to limit it to 2 terms. So we'll see if we can hold that. That'll be interesting. All right, he wanted his faithful Secretary of War, William Howard Taft, to run for president. After a dinner party one evening, Teddy and the Tafts went into the library. Teddy sat down in a big chair, closed his eyes, and said, "I am the 7th son of a 7th daughter. I have clairvoyant powers. I see a man standing before me, weighing about 350 pounds. That was generous. Taft weighed more than 350 pounds. There was something hanging over his head. I cannot make out what it is. At one time, it looked like the presidency. Then again, it looks like the Chief Justiceship of the Supreme Court." Mrs. Taft cried, "Make it the presidency." William Howard Taft declared, "Make it the Chief Justiceship." In the end, Teddy and Mrs. Taft talked William Howard Taft into running for the White House. He was no Teddy Roosevelt. By the end of his term, Taft had compromised with the conservatives so often that Teddy felt that Taft had betrayed the progressive principles he was supposed to uphold. For that reason, if you remember, Teddy was a true progressive. He was the trust buster. He was the person who said, and we will be hearing about this in the future, the billionaires that we have today who can do anything they want, any place they want, buy anything they want. Elon Musk is buying Twitter, supposedly, or toying or playing with the idea of buying Twitter and changing the rules to benefit the people that he likes and punish the people he doesn't like. I'm just reading an article about a billionaire who bought an island off the coast of Hawaii called Lanai, and the way he is shaping that island to his own personal satisfaction, pushing people out of their houses. I'll get into that as we go to it. So. He missed being the center of things, and he decided to run against Taft for the Republican nomination. Taft did not want to be president again, but he did not want TR to get back in the White House. TR defeated, this is the important part, TR defeated Taft in 9 out of 10 primaries, including Taft's own home state of Ohio. But the other states held conventions that nominated delegates favoring Taft. At the Republican National Convention, Taft's renomination was a sure thing. The chairman of the convention gabbled down so many Roosevelt motions that one delegate raised a point of order stating that the steamroller was exceeding the speed limit. The steamroller was exceeding the speed limit. After that, whenever the chairman spoke, the Roosevelt delegates would toot whistles and rub sandpaper together to imitate the sounds of a steamroller. And most of us don't even know what a steamroller is. A steamroller, as we still call it a steamroller, but they actually ran on a steam engine, if you can imagine that. It was like a train with big roller wheels. All right, when Taft was finally nominated, Roosevelt and the progressive wing of the party walked out and met later to form the Progressive Party, which of course nominated Teddy for president. He declared his hat was in the ring and that he was stripped to the buff, feeling fit as a bull moose. And the party symbol was born, as well as the nickname of the entire campaign. Teddy explained away his no third term pledge, which we remember he made like 12 years before, by explaining that he had meant no consecutive third term. He didn't mean he couldn't do a third term after laying out for 4 years, just no third 3 terms in a row. One of his supporters further explained that a man may say he does not want a second cup of coffee, but that does not mean he will never want another cup of coffee in the future. Vaudeville comedians had a lot of fun with another cup of coffee jokes. Taft had little chance of winning, but was determined that TR not win. He referred to himself as a man of straw, saying that he'd been one for too long and that even a rat in a corner will fight. Of course, describing himself as a cornered rat did not do much for his re-election chances. The Democratic Party nominated Governor Woodrow Wilson of New Jersey. Wilson was also a progressive who agreed with TR and Taft on most issues. There were 1 or 2 issues on which Wilson and Roosevelt disagreed, and these became the basis of the campaign. Taft more or less dropped out of the campaign early, leaving it a mainly two-way fight between TR and Wilson. He said trusts were not necessarily bad if they were controlled. He considered them necessary for an efficient economy. His plan called for more regulatory powers for the federal government. Wilson called for his program the New Freedom. To him, all monopolies were bad and needed to be broken up and eliminated. He felt the freedom of competition had been removed from the marketplace and had to be restored. This could not be done as long as the trust survived. His plan called for less federal power and more freedom for the people. As you can see, everybody has statements that are contradictory and confusing. Breaking up all the trusts means less federal power. That does not make sense to me. All right, so all 3 candidates took to the stump in one of the most active campaigns yet. There was one lull in the campaign. On October 14th, while getting into a car in Milwaukee, Roosevelt was shot by a fanatic named John Schrank. Schrank yelled something about no third term and fired at Roosevelt. It struck him, but he refused to go to the hospital. He said he had a speech to make and stated, "I will make this speech or die." With great drama, he made the speech in almost a whisper to a silent audience. At the end of the speech, the audience stood and cheered, and Roosevelt finally went to the hospital. The bullet had struck the doubled-over speech in Teddy's coat pocket and lodged in his ribs near the lung. The doctor said it would have been much worse if Roosevelt were not in such great physical condition. Both Taft and Wilson sent him telegrams of sympathy and ceased campaigning until Roosevelt was better. Both of his opponents ceased campaigning until he was better. Think about that. And yes.
When did he die then?
Roosevelt?
Yes.
I have to go to the end here. It was he made it to the end of the campaign, but he lost and then died shortly after that.
Thank you.
When the votes were counted, there were no surprises. Wilson won an electoral landslide, taking 435 electoral votes to 88 for Roosevelt and 8 for Taft. Wilson did not, however, capture a majority of the popular vote. Once again, the person who does not capture the majority of the popular vote, roughly 6 million people voted for Wilson compared to 4 million for Roosevelt and 3.5 million for Taft. So the two people, the progressives that voted for Taft and Roosevelt together by splitting their vote, allowed Wilson to become the president. Since the Republican Party split between Teddy and Taft, Wilson took most of the states with a plurality. That's less than a majority, but the most of all the 3 individuals. Since the electoral votes of the state go to whoever wins the most votes, Wilson won 40 states, most with less than a majority of the popular vote. So you can see what happened there again. Wilson went on to serve 2 terms, make great changes in our economic systems. He came around to Roosevelt's way of thinking, strengthened the regulatory powers of the federal government. He also created the Federal Reserve System we use today. And something you don't hear about very much, Wilson was from the South and was a segregationist and enforced segregation, which had been becoming more and more lax in the federal government. He reinstated segregation. So there's kind of a problem there that we need to see. Taft often said he lost on the Dr. Fell principle. What is that? I do not like you, Dr. Fell. The reason why I cannot tell. But this I know and know full well, I do not like you, Dr. Fell. So whatever that little jingle means. Taft retired, taught law, and was later appointed Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, which is what he always wanted. He was one of our most successful Chief Justices, in this writer's opinion, and had a major impact on the reorganization of the Supreme Court and the entire judicial branch. Teddy Roosevelt tried again for the president in 1920. He was one of the leaders of the nomination, and he suddenly died in 1919. He had contracted a form of jungle fever while exploring the River of Doubt in Brazil in 1913. This led to surgery and other medical problems. He died of a blood clot in January of 1919. And if you know Teddy's history, he was a great explorer, went to Brazil with his son. He's the originator of the teddy bear. He was out at Yellowstone National Park and wanted to shoot his sample bear, kind of like some of our past presidents' sons. One of the guides brought him a little grizzly bear and put it on a tree and said, "Here you go, President or TR, here's a bear for you to shoot." And TR said, "I'm not shooting anything, it's basically tied up for me to shoot. I'm an actual hunter who actually tracks and hunts for real. I don't shoot captive animals." And this little bear was saved and became stuffed as a toy and became what we know, and that's the reason they call it the teddy bear, because of Teddy Roosevelt. So there's a little more history for you. All right. This election is singular for another reason. It is the only election in which a third party finished ahead of one of the two major parties at the time. The Bull Moose, or Progressive Party, finished in second place, with the Republican Party in the distant third place. We've really been treated to such an active and interesting campaign. Let's hope the coming one surprises us. I don't know when this was written, but the last one was a surprise. All right. They also have a big display on Annie Oakley. The first picture on the left, Annie could shoot a rifle over her shoulder looking in a mirror and split a playing card. In other words, they would hold a playing card up sideways and she could split the playing card shooting her rifle in a mirror. This is a picture of her in her prime, and Annie Oakley kept shooting and teaching shooting and being active in life until she died. I think she was 53 when she died. This is on the other side is a picture of her in her final years. And this is a picture of Annie and her famous dog. When she was raising money for the troops in World War I, she would teach her dog to find money wrapped in an envelope, and people would hide it around like they would have a gathering. She would demonstrate shooting and then ask people to contribute for war bonds, and they would hide money in the audience wrapped in a envelope, and she had taught her dog to find that money and bring it up to her. So she was a show person from the word go. All right. A star of Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, the 19th century icon inspired TV shows, movies, and musicals, but her fame also led to conflicting accounts of her life. Legend has it that Annie Oakley was such a skilled sharpshooter that she single-handedly foiled train robberies, shot bears and panthers, and killed a wolf that already had her in its grip. That was completely false. That was in a novel based on her life, The Rifle Queen. Oakley's fame as one of the most skilled gun shooters of her lifetime inspired many tall tales. Some of these myths live on today thanks to the 1946 Broadway musical Annie, Get Your Gun, whose final scene depicts Oakley losing a match intentionally to protect her future husband's ego. Not true. She beat her future husband, and that's the reason he retired from shooting and became her manager. He recognized a meal ticket when he saw it. It is difficult to separate facts from fiction. As a star attraction of Buffalo Bill's Wild West show, known for its romanticized portrayal of frontier life, she showcased her talents on the stages across the world for 17 years. She astounded audiences by shooting cigarettes from her husband's lip, riddling playing cards in mid-air, and her go-to trick, shooting a target behind her back while spotting it from a mirror. Oakley's reputation was largely crafted by her husband, Frank Butler, and promoters of the Wild West show, but some of Oakley's own accounts of her life and those of her descendants still remain. For starters, Oakley wasn't the gunslinger's real name. Born August 13, 1860, as Phoebe Ann Moses, which the family sometimes spells as Mosey, M-O-Z-E-E, or M-O-S-E-Y, or M-A-U-Z-Y. She started using the stage name about the time she joined the Wild West show in 1885. Instead of the Wild West, Oakley was originally from Darke County, Ohio. She had a rough start. After her father passed away when she was 5 years old, she helped provide for her family. In National Geographic, The Bullseye, a photography of Annie Oakley that Annie helped feed the family by making traps to catch game before she took up her father's rifle. When her stepfather died in 1870, struggling to make ends meet, her mother sent some of her children to live with neighbors. A local farmer took Oakley into his home to help care for his children. Despite his promises that she'd have time for school and hunting, however, it quickly turned into indentured servitude. And this was fairly common before we had welfare departments and child support services. Kids were farmed out. If you didn't have relatives, your neighbors took kids, and some people took advantage of this. They made their kids into little slaves. They never got paid any wages. They worked from sunup to sundown, did the jobs that nobody else wanted to do. She managed to escape and ultimately returned home to her mother as a teen. That's when she started to regularly sell her kills to the local grocer and hotels, earning enough to pay off the mortgage on her mother's house. Think of that. She was such a good hunter. And of course, this is in the days, the 1800s, when game was plentiful in the Ohio forests, when a lot of people lived off of game. When they hunt deer, they used the deer and they actually lived on the deer. They didn't grow cattle at home. They hunted deer, they hunted squirrels. They pretty much hunted anything that moved in those days and ate anything that moved. And she would sell these to the local hotels for food. She'd sell it to the local grocer to sell on to other people. And she made enough money doing this to pay off the mortgage on the farm. Her mastery of shooting became her career and even led to meet her husband, fellow sharpshooter Frank E. Butler. In 1875, she was visiting her sister in Cincinnati when she was invited to a shooting match with Butler. Both Oakley and Butler hit every pigeon released from the trap until Butler's final shot fell beyond the boundary line, awarding Oakley the win. Shortly after, the two were married and began performing together. So the big city boy found the small town girl and brought her up. And when they say shooting the pigeons from the trap, these are clay pigeons. I don't know how you're familiar with that. There's a little spring mount shooter. You pull the lever and it'll shoot a clay pigeon up into the air, and you can aim it in different directions. It'll go high, it'll go low, it'll go to the left, go to the right. The clay pigeon is about this big around, has an orange center, and you use your shotgun, which you usually use a 410, and you track it when it goes up and shoot it. We did that for fun. We still do it for fun occasionally. I can hit 4 or 5 in a row. I couldn't hit 100 in a row, particularly. But it's difficult, but it's not impossible. Let's see. The star of Buffalo's Wild West show, Butler and Oakley traveled all over the U.S. with the Wild West Show Company. The show, created in 1883 by Buffalo Bill or William F. Cody, was an outdoor extravaganza of the fictionalized Wild West, including reenactments of cowboys battling Indians, shooting expositions, and skits showing off roping and horse riding. Cody would later publicly renounce some of the show's harmful depictions of Native Americans. The couple left the Western show when Oakley was injured in a 1901 train accident. However, she continued to appear at exhibitions until she officially retired at 53. Oakley was soon considering other career moves like starring in movies or writing a memoir, but her health declined rapidly after a car accident in 1922 left her with a permanent leg injury. In 1926, she was diagnosed with a blood disorder and died at 66 in Greenville, Ohio. Her husband, who had been visiting North Carolina for the winter, died 18 days later. So they were inseparable even for all those years. Annie Oakley was not a hillbilly. She was not a Darke County conservative. She liked fine things. She liked fine clothes. She liked fine dining. She was pretty sophisticated. She met the Queen of England. She traveled over England. She traveled over Europe. She learned the way people can live in a more cultured way, and she brought that back. She is known for, during World War I, she wrote to the president multiple times offering to train a regiment of female gun shooters to be in the military, to be snipers, not to be on the front line, to be snipers to protect the other soldiers. Not surprisingly, she was refused in that offer. But throughout her life, she offered to teach women how to shoot. She thought it was very important for women to know how to shoot. And these were the days when you were shooting things, you were shooting 22 rifles, and even the way people talked, nobody carried handguns out in the open in Ohio in the 1850s or 1860s. There was actually more gun control in those days. If you read the stories of even the Wild West, all the Wild West towns had signs. You can even see it in Back to the Future, where when you come into town, you leave your weapons with the sheriff's deputy at the edge of town. You don't carry guns into town. That was very common in almost all the Wild West towns because people were tired of getting shot walking down the street by stray bullets. So, let's see. Crossroads of Destiny, Lowell Thomas, Longtown, Annie Oakley, where are we? Lowell Moose Party. Okay, and then we have, okay. There are 3 other exhibits there. One is an early Ohio village, which is very remarkable and has a lot of history in it. And the other 2 I didn't write down, so I don't have them with me right now. But you will enjoy your visit to the museum. It's full of information. They have some antique transportation like wagons and horse harnesses. I think you'll enjoy it if you want to do it. And if you don't go with us, go some other time. It's a museum worthy of supporting. Any comments? Yes.
Annie Oakley and her husband's graves are on the way to North Star. There's a cemetery.
Oh, okay.
Brock. Thank you.
Brock Cemetery, yeah.
Brock Cemetery, all right. I was not aware of that, and it didn't say anything about that. I wonder if the Garst Museum has that information, because it wasn't in the
Yeah, they do.
They should have.
Surely.
Okay.
She
All
died, she died on East 3rd Street also.
That's
Yes.
right.
Yeah, she died in, yes,
Probably seems there, man.
The thing about I Don't Like You, Dr. Phil,
yes.
it sounds so familiar, and I'm thinking, what is it? It's the Dr. Seuss, I Don't Like Green Hams and Green Eggs and Ham.
Yes.
I wonder if that would that rhyme, the rhyming was taken.
I think that rhyme preceded Dr. Seuss, so I'm thinking Dr. Seuss.
Yeah, it's history.
Yes. All right, offering. We're going to hear the hymn of St. Matthew. As is usual, please bring up anything you have to offer, and if you need something, please take something. We are here for your benefit. 277, When We Went Homeward. That is an old song. When we wend homeward, who knows what wend means? Wending down the road, that means traveling. That's an old word you hardly hear anymore. Most people don't know what sowing is. Sowing, not sowing S-E-W, but sowing like sowing oats used to be done when you throw it out by hand. That would be sowing. And then shouldering the sheaves. I think we talked about that before. Sheaves are when they would reap the wheat, they would cut the wheat and bind it into bundles. And each one of those bundles was a sheave, and you would put the bundles in a pile to shed the rain as they dried, and then take it to the threshing machine and have it threshed and separate the grain from the straw. So we're losing all of those connections, except for us old people who still like to do that. Or if you go to the old threshers meeting in Dark County, that's always fun to go to, and you can see these machines in operation there. Okay, Extinguishing the Chalice. Be True, Be Well, Be Loving by Cynthia Landrum. We leave this gathered community, but we don't leave our connection, our concerns, our care for each other. Our service to each other, to the world, and to our faith continues. Until we are together again, friends, be strong, be well, be true, be loving. And we'll hear The Way We Were. in, so there's fresh donuts, well, fresh being week-old donuts, fresh for me.
Yeah.
Give you a preview of next week. This is a picture of a manatee. Next week, presuming nothing else happens to change our course during the middle of the week, we're talking about endangered creatures. 1,000 manatees, over 1,000 manatees died last year in Florida. That's 10% of the total population, basically from starvation. What's happening is the pollution from septic tanks, runoff from farms, and runoff from fertilizing in yards is polluting the bay. They live on seagrass, and what's happening is the polluted bay is multiplying the population of algae, which is shading out the seagrass, and the seagrass is dying, and the manatees have nothing to eat. The state of Florida, the Conservation Bureau of Florida, actually tried to help the manatees by feeding them lettuce. You can imagine the price of lettuce is practically doubled. I'm sure that's not working out too well. And my last understanding was more than 500 have died already this year, so we're going to exceed the number from last year. So next week, sea turtles, manatees, endangered creatures, unless something monumental happens during the week and we change direction again. So have a good week from New Madison Unitarian Universalist Church. And wear your masks. That has not died out yet either.
Oh, sure.